Have you ever stared at your phone, waiting for a message that never comes? Not because you're needy, but because you once mattered to someone who now seems to have vanished without explanation. That silence isn't just a lack of sound. It's a weight, a signal, a shift you can't ignore. And yet, most of us try to explain it away, hoping tomorrow will bring a reply that today did not. This episode isn't about blame. It's about truth. Raw, unfiltered, and necessary. As Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Today, we pull the silence into the light. Today, we begin reclaiming your peace. This is Part 1, The Sound of Silence. Every day, thousands of men check their phones and find nothing. No message, no missed call, just the quiet sting of being forgotten. You scroll through old photos and reread conversations, chasing fragments of warmth in a cold timeline. That silence isn't accidental. It's an answer you don't want to hear, and yet, it speaks louder than any excuse you've been telling yourself. You think maybe she's just busy, maybe she's overwhelmed, maybe life got in the way. But people show up for what matters to them, and time is rarely the real reason. According to psychologist Dr. Guy Winch, emotional rejection activates the same areas in the brain as physical pain. So when she stops reaching out, your chest hurts, not just emotionally, but biologically. It's not weakness, it's neuroscience. And denying that truth only deepens your confusion. Silence in a relationship isn't neutral. It's a form of communication, and often a form of departure. You notice the shift. Her replies get shorter, her tone changes, the emojis disappear, but you still chase the version of her that once made you feel seen, not realizing that version may no longer exist. Behavioral science has a name for this: emotional detachment. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow unraveling. You keep giving more, hoping your love will bring her back. But love that must beg isn't love. It's survival dressed up as devotion. And the longer you wait, the more you lose parts of yourself. You rationalize, minimize, and carry the weight of her absence as if it were your fault. But it's not. Her silence is her decision. Your worth doesn't disappear because her attention did. Part 2, Patterns that reveal the truth. When communication fades, we often hold on to hope instead of paying attention to the pattern. But patterns never lie. They reveal what words try to hide. If you're always the one starting conversations, always keeping the energy alive, always fixing the silence with effort, that's not love. That's imbalance. And imbalance sustained over time becomes emotional exhaustion. If she stops calling, stops checking in, stops asking about your day, that's not forgetfulness. It's emotional distance taking root. People don't forget those they value. They don't misplace someone who truly matters. In truth, neglect is rarely accidental. It's intentional. Quiet, subtle, but unmistakable once you stop making excuses. And still, we tell ourselves stories to keep the pain at bay. Maybe she's going through something. Maybe she just needs space. But ask yourself this: when someone truly cares, do they disappear without explanation? Do they stay silent while you wait, question, and ache? Neuroscientist Dr. John Cassiope, a pioneer in loneliness research, found that prolonged emotional neglect impacts not only mental health, but also our physical well-being, leading to stress, poor sleep, and even immune dysfunction. In other words, her silence isn't just hurting your heart, it's harming your body. So why do we tolerate it? Why do we stay in spaces where we are no longer emotionally safe? It's because we confuse effort with love, persistence with loyalty. But love that only flows one way will eventually drain you, and the longer you pour into someone who has stopped receiving, the more invisible you become, even to yourself. A woman who once greeted you with warmth but now offers cold replies isn't just distracted, she's disengaged. And a disengaged heart rarely returns to full presence. It fades slowly, step by step, until one day you realize you're the only one still trying. You can't fix what someone refuses to nurture. You can't carry connection alone and call it partnership. So if the pattern is always you giving, always you texting first, always you making the plans, then it's not miscommunication, it's misalignment. What's worse is we begin to internalize the silence. We think, maybe if I say the right thing, maybe if I try harder, maybe she'll come back. But that's a dangerous trap, because instead of standing tall, you start shrinking yourself just to stay. You sacrifice your peace to chase the memory of a version of her that may no longer exist. Psychologist Dr. Harriet Lerner calls this over-perfunctioning in relationships, where one person does all the emotional lifting while the other checks out. And over time, this dynamic builds resentment, fatigue, and self-doubt. You deserve better than breadcrumbs. You deserve presence, not uncertainty. You deserve to be someone's choice, not their convenience. The moment you recognize the pattern, you reclaim your power. Because love, at its best, is mutual. And if it's not love. It's emotional dependency disguised as hope. Part 3. The cost of holding on. There's a quiet war that happens inside you when you keep reaching for someone who's no longer reaching back. At first, it feels like patience. Then it becomes self-doubt. Eventually, it turns into a quiet erosion of who you used to be. And the most dangerous part? You don't even notice it until the pieces of you start going missing. You become the man who texts longer, jokes harder, forgives faster. You offer more, but receive less. You keep hoping she'll look at you the way she used to, not realizing she already turned the page. And with every unanswered message, every postponed plan, you lose a little more of your fire. But love isn't supposed to dim you. It's not meant to turn you into a version of yourself that begs, overextends, and breaks in silence. Love should lift. Real love never demands that you prove your worth just to be seen. According to Dr. Kristen Neff, a leading expert in self-compassion, people who show themselves kindness during emotional distress recover faster and feel stronger. But what most men do instead is blame themselves. They think, if I were more attractive, more interesting, more successful, maybe she would have stayed. That cycle is not just exhausting, it's destructive. The cost of holding on is measured in late-night overthinking, in anxious rereading of texts, in the mental loops that ask, what did I do wrong? It's measured in how far you shrink just to fit into her emotional availability. And the longer you stay, the more you teach yourself that this is all you're worth. But let's be clear, you were never meant to convince someone of your value. That's not love, that's a sales pitch, and your soul is not up for negotiation. You don't need to earn affection by sacrificing your peace. In fact, the more you beg for love, the less lovable you begin to feel. And that distortion becomes your lens. You see every new interaction as another chance to prove you matter. But the truth is, your worth was never lost. It's just been buried under the weight of trying too hard for someone who stopped showing up. What you're experiencing is emotional malnutrition, feeding someone else's comfort at the cost of your own. You deserve more than a relationship that leaves you starving for connection. You deserve someone who brings peace, not confusion. Someone who chooses you, not just tolerates you when it's convenient. So stop asking what else you can do. Start asking what this is doing to you. Because holding on isn't free. It costs you your time, your energy, your dignity, and eventually, it costs you your identity. Part 4. Breaking the illusion. One of the hardest things to accept is that the version of her you're holding on to may only exist in your memory, not in your present, and not in her reality, but in the version you created to survive the disconnects. You built a story around her, a story where her silence is temporary, where her coldness is stress, where her distance is confusion, not choice. But here's the truth that stings before it frees you. You've been holding on to potential, not presence, possibility, not partnership. And while hope can be healing, false hope can be a prison. The more you romanticize what was, the more you delay facing what is. And what is? is silence. You keep saying she'll come back when things settle, or maybe she just needs time. But let me ask you, has she said that to you? Has she shown that in her actions? Or is that a narrative you've built to avoid the pain of letting go? Neuroscience calls this cognitive dissonance. It's the mental tension that arises when reality doesn't match your beliefs. You believe she cares, but her behavior shows otherwise. And to reduce that inner conflict, your brain rewrites the meaning of her actions. You interpret absence as mystery, indifference as emotional struggle. But none of those rewrite what you feel, unwanted. Dr. Ramani Durvashula, a clinical psychologist and expert on toxic relationship dynamics, explains that illusions in love often form when we cling to who someone was in the beginning. But beginnings are easy. Consistency is what defines character. And love that requires you to ignore your instincts is not love. It's illusion dressed in nostalgia. The illusion says, she's just lost. But the truth says, you're the only one still searching. The illusion says, this is love just going through a phase, but the truth says, this is emotional starvation. The illusion comforts you short-term. The truth liberates you long-term. And sometimes, what keeps you stuck isn't her silence. It's your refusal to believe it means something, because facing it means grieving. Not just her, but the idea of her, the future you imagined, the version of yourself that existed only in her presence. And that kind of grief doesn't come with closure. It comes in waves, quiet ones, the kind that crash hardest when you're alone at night with nothing but your own voice left. But here's what no one tells you. Illusions only break when you're ready to feel everything you've been avoiding, the sadness, the anger, the disappointment, the shame. And once you do, clarity begins. It whispers, you were not too much. You were just with someone who gave too little. And that's when the healing starts, not when she replies, not when she explains, but when you stop explaining her silence to yourself. You see, she doesn't have to block you to be gone. She can be fully active on social media, posting selfies and quotes about healing, and still be completely absent from your life. That is not contradiction, it's confirmation. Real love doesn't confuse you. It doesn't play hide and seek with your self-worth. It stands beside you even when things get messy. So if you're constantly decoding her signals, analyzing her texts, walking on eggshells, this isn't love. This is emotional exhaustion with a romantic soundtrack. The illusion that love has to hurt runs deep. It's passed down in music, in movies, in stories of people who held on and finally won them back. But this isn't a movie. This is your life. And the longer you chase a fantasy, the longer you postpone the reality of peace. Peace doesn't always feel good at first. It feels like stillness, like silence you didn't ask for. But peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of self. And once you break the illusion, you make room for the truth. That someone out there can and will love you without conditions, without games, without disappearing acts. But before they do, you have to choose that for yourself first. Part 5. Choosing dignity over impulse. There comes a moment when silence is no longer a question, it's an answer. And in that moment, you're faced with two choices. Chase the one who turned away, or choose yourself. Most people chase, not because they lack dignity, but because their impulse is stronger than their clarity. The need for resolution, for validation, for one more chance, it overpowers reason. But here's the paradox. The moment you reach out from a place of desperation, you don't just lose ground, you lose yourself. Because it's not just a text, it's a statement. It says, I'm still willing to trade my peace for your presence. And every time you do that, you hand over a piece of your self-worth. That's why choosing dignity isn't always loud. It doesn't always feel victorious. Sometimes it feels like heartbreak, like deleting a conversation you read 100 times, like resisting the urge to check if she saw your story, like silence that feels like punishment, but is really healing in disguise. Neuroscience tells us that impulsive behavior is driven by the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes emotional response. When we're hurt, triggered, or rejected, it pushes us to react immediately, to seek relief from emotional discomfort. But dignity lives in the prefrontal cortex, the rational, future-minded part of your mind. Choosing dignity over impulse means slowing down, breathing, responding with intention instead of reaction. Dr. Susan David, a Harvard psychologist, calls this emotional agility, the ability to feel your emotions deeply but not let them drive your decisions destructively. And that skill is what separates healing from spiraling. Because let's be honest, reaching out to her feels good for a moment, but what comes next? More silence? A dry reply? The familiar ache of being half seen? Dignity says no to that cycle. It says, I'd rather be alone with peace than together in pieces. Choosing dignity also means choosing boundaries, not to punish her, but to protect you. It means not checking her page every night, not crafting the perfect message to get a reaction, not stalking her subtle signals like a detective of hope. It means letting the silence speak, and letting it echo long enough for you to hear yourself again. And maybe, just maybe, that silence will reach her too, not as revenge, not as manipulation, but as a mirror. Because sometimes the most powerful message you can send is none at all. This is where strength becomes stillness, where restraint becomes power, and where the boy who needed her to choose him becomes the man who chooses himself. So the next time your fingers hover over your phone, ask, am I reaching out for connection, or am I abandoning myself to chase closure that may never come? Every day you don't text her, you choose yourself. Every time you feel the wave rise and you ride it without reacting, you win something deeper than validation. You win your identity back. Because dignity isn't about walking away with pride. It's about walking back into yourself. Part 6. When she finally feels the silence. At first, your silence won't be noticed, not because it doesn't matter, but because she's still surrounded by noise. There are texts from friends, notifications from apps, stories to post, playlists to blast. She has 100 ways to drown out the stillness. And for a while, it works. She scrolls, she smiles, she shares. And yet, beneath the curated moments, something starts to shift. A feeling she didn't expect begins to rise. Not loud, but persistent. A quiet discomfort. Because when someone's used to you always being there, they don't notice your presence. They only notice your absence. It won't hit her in the middle of a party or during the day when distractions are loud. It hits at night. When the lights dim, when no one is texting, when the phone is finally down. That's when your silence becomes real, not because you stopped speaking, but because you stopped reaching. Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist, explains that emotional bonds activate the brain's reward system. When that bond is disrupted, the brain enters a withdrawal-like state. Just as you felt the ache of missing her, she too begins to feel the absence of your energy, your consistency, your attention. But here's the catch. She doesn't feel it all at once. It creeps in slowly, in the form of a memory, a favorite song, a place you once went together, a joke only you two understood. And when she reaches for her phone to send a quick message, she stops. Because you're not there anymore. Your silence becomes a mirror, and for the first time she sees not just your absence, but her choices, the way she pulled away, the way she minimized your presence, the way she let you carry the connection alone. And it starts to sting. Not because she suddenly wants you back, but because she realizes what she lost was real, what she took for granted had depth. And she didn't notice it until you stopped proving it. This is not about revenge, it's about reality. Because dignity is not meant to hurt her. It's meant to heal you. But sometimes, the byproduct of you rising is her reckoning. She remembers how your presence felt safe, how your words brought comfort, how your consistency made her feel chosen, even when she stopped choosing you. And in that stillness, something breaks. Not in you, but in her. Because silence is not absence, it's space. And space has power. It forces reflection. It reveals what was covered up by convenience and ego. It lets the truth breathe. So no, you didn't disappear. You evolved. You stopped begging, stopped chasing, stopped pouring into a cup with holes in it, and now she has to sit with what remains. And for many, that silence becomes louder than any speech, any text, any final goodbye. You gave her kindness. You gave her access. You gave her the chance to love a version of you that was whole, loyal, and ready. If she couldn't see it then, let your absence teach her what your presence once offered. Reclaiming the man you were meant to be. You were never meant to chase silence. You were built for clarity, for strength, for a love that doesn't require you to shrink just to stay. But when we spend too long being half seen, we begin to forget who we were before we were broken, and the road back starts not with revenge, but with remembrance. You were a man with purpose, with standards, with a light that didn't need someone else's validation to shine. And though her absence made you question that, it never took it away. It only buried it beneath the weight of waiting. Now it's time to rise, not to win her back, but to win yourself back. That means rebuilding the habits you once abandoned, rekindling the passions you let fade, refinding the voice you silenced just to keep the peace. According to Dr. Joe Dispenza, when you break out of emotional loops tied to past relationships, your brain literally rewires itself. New thoughts create new emotions, and new emotions give birth to a new identity. In other words, healing isn't just emotional, it's neurological. You don't just move on, you evolve. This evolution doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the moment you choose self-respect over self-sacrifice. When you go for that morning run instead of scrolling through her feed, when you write your goals instead of writing unsent messages, when you finally say, I am enough, and believe it not just on the surface, but in your bones. Because the man you were meant to be doesn't wait for love to prove his value. He brings his value into every room, every conversation, every decision. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He chooses himself daily, with intention, with compassion, with courage. You're not just reclaiming your confidence, you're reclaiming your peace. The kind of peace that doesn't shake when people leave. The kind of peace that isn't conditional on replies or returned affection. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and what you deserve. And when you embody that, fully, unapologetically, you stop attracting the familiar chaos. You stop craving what once hurt you, and you start creating space for something greater, something worthy of the man you've become. Because healing isn't about going back, it's about moving forward with wisdom, with boundaries, with vision. You've already been broken. Now it's time to build. Part B. What real love feels like. Real love isn't confusing. It doesn't leave you wondering where you stand or what you did wrong. It doesn't punish you with silence or reward you with breadcrumbs. Real love brings calm, not chaos. Security, not suspense. It shows up with consistency. It communicates even when it's hard. It doesn't disappear just because things aren't perfect. It stands beside you, not above you. It chooses honesty over ego, and most importantly, it chooses you every single day, not just when it's convenient. Love that's real won't ask you to sacrifice your self-worth to stay connected. It won't feel like chasing or earning or explaining your feelings just to be heard. It listens, it holds space, it meets you where you are and grows from there. Dr. Brené Brown, a renowned researcher on vulnerability and connections, says, true belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And the right love, the kind worth waiting for, won't need you to perform. It will honor your truth. You see, real love feels light. Even in struggle, it feels anchored. Even in challenge, it feels safe. It doesn't weaponize your vulnerability. It welcomes it. And when you share your fears, your flaws, your dreams, it leans in closer, not further away. But before you can experience that kind of love, you must become the kind of person who can recognize it. You have to let go of the noise, the illusions, the ghosts of almosts that taught you to mistake anxiety for passion. And when you do, everything changes. You no longer settle for people who make you doubt yourself. You no longer glorify chaos and call it chemistry. You begin to choose differently, not because you're bitter, but because you're better. You've outgrown survival-based love. Now you seek something rooted in truth, trust, and mutual effort. And maybe, just maybe, you'll look back on this heartbreak and realize it wasn't the end. It was the invitation, the one that called you back to yourself, the one that helped you draw the line between being wanted and being valued. Because in the end, real love doesn't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. It makes you feel seen, heard, held, not just for who you could be, but for exactly who you are. So don't chase love, become love. Don't beg for peace, be the peace. The right person will recognize that energy, not because you screamed it, but because you lived it. And when they do, you won't have to question a thing. If this message found its way into your heart, it wasn't by accident. It was your moment of clarity. You're not here to chase someone's approval. You're here to remember who you are without it. At The Chill Stoic, we speak to the quiet strength inside you, the part of you that's tired of noise and ready for truth. We don't beg, we don't perform. We rise with purpose, peace, and presence. So, if you're ready to stop shrinking to be loved and start standing in your worth, subscribe, share, and stay close. This is where transformation begins. This is where men rebuild from within. This is The Chill Stoic.